We saw a 39-month high for cocoa futures earlier this week. What is driving this? Is this all a demand story driven by increasing demand, a change in tastes in emerging markets?
That's a good part of the story as far as I can tell. For sure that the demand has been strong. It's definitely coming from developing markets. I mean, China, I think it was a few years ago, was the 11th largest consumer. Now it's gone to the 8th. So it's, really coming out of nowhere, and it's becoming an important consumer of chocolate. And but the other side of the story is just supply shortages, which are due to weather, and also which are due to probably more than anything underinvestment in the biggest producing region, which is West Africa. West Africa produces about 70% of the world's cocoa.
Yeah, and interesting to consider whether a sustained increase in cocoa prices, if that is indeed what this turned into, whether that would encourage further supply, whether it would encourage producers to invest more in supplying more cocoa.
Yeah, that's the big issue. Most experts are saying that we need much higher cocoa prices to bring on more production. Just going way back, these regions were under colonization. I mean, that was 50 years ago. And when colonization disappeared, so did a lot of the investment. And I think this big demand story is something which has really only developed in the last 5 or 10 years. And particularly over the last 3 years, where we see a higher demand. So I think, that region can produce a lot more, but there's a lead time. So we need a lot of investment to pour in that region or other regions that can produce, but particularly West Africa, yeah.
Hershey recently said that they expected commodity costs to increase in 2015. Coast, this trend towards emerging markets, evolving tastes and buying these affordable luxuries, if you like, in this case centered around cocoa and chocolate, is that something that's driving a number of the soft commodities sectors at the moment? Is this changing tastes in emerging markets, is that a bigger theme than the one we're just discussing here with cocoa?
Absolutely, but it's that relates a lot to the protein market, because developing markets are incorporating more animal protein into their diets, and as they do that, that puts a multiplier effect, or let's say a leveraged effect on the demand for grain, underlying feedstocks, and that's what's been driving the grain markets as a kind of a longer-term structural trend in the last 15 or 20 years, and that continues, of course.
Is there any fallout from geopolitical tensions in the commodities markets at the moment? Of course, we've seen Russia acting to stop imports of certain foodstuffs from parts of Europe and parts of the from Europe and the United States. Is this something that's on your radar at the moment? I know that Russia is now the 4th largest confectionery market in the world.
Yeah, the instability in Ukraine has been an issue for some of the logistics and transport. I've been talking to some traders who told me there was a lot of fears in terms of the logistics out of the Ukrainian ports. But I think things have, well, we'll see how things develop. But it's still a bit tenuous. But for now, in the recent weeks, they settled down a bit. But still, it's definitely an important issue. But of course, the most important issue for crops. Yeah, is weather.
Yeah, always, as always. I've been reading very interesting reports about hazelnuts and a shortage of hazelnuts as a result of weather in Turkey. We won't go into too much detail there, Coast, perhaps. But in terms of the overall soft commodities market, you're quite positive, aren't you, in terms of increasing requirements for food production as set out by various international bodies?
Yeah, absolutely. The overall structural trends are still in place. The FAO, said a couple of years ago, and they maintain this position that we need to produce 40 to 50% more food by the year 2030, and up to 70 to 80% more food by the year 2050. That's a huge objective. That means we're going to have to put on a tremendous amount of new land into production, and we're going to have to continue to drive efficiency. So the industry is benefiting from really positive trends. Of course, in the short term, this can all be influenced by weather. The demand trends are there. Developing markets are eating more protein. So we've structured our own strategy around that theme, and we're investing very much in farming companies. That's where our Gaia farming index was actually developed based on that theme, actually.
Coast, thank you very much for joining us today. Coast Sullinger from Gaia Capital Advisors.